up, YouTube? It's me, Alex, and we're here for Fancast Friday. And this fan casting is going to be part 4 of my MCU X-Men fan casting. We're talking about Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler, and Pryde, aka Shadowcat. I planned to have this video out a long time ago, right after I did part 3, which had Angel and Storm in it, but stuff happened. We're just moving forward in the MCU. If you haven't watched my first 3 parts, go to my channel, and they'll be linked in the description box. Part 1, I talk about Scott and Jean. And part 2, I talk about Beast and Iceman. And then in part 3, I talk about Angel and Storm. So here we'll be talking about Nightcrawler and Shadowcat. So before we get started, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications for when I post more videos, and of course, like the video. And if you agree with my choices, please share the video. I love it. I appreciate it. So let's hop right into this. So to give you a refresher, I would like for the MCU X-Men to be introduced by this whole multiverse situation, because there's so much happening with Spider-Man and with Doctor Strange and with what we saw with Loki, and so much information that's coming with the multiverse that I feel like the MCU X-Men should be from different universes. I just don't think that is a great idea to have the X-Men be included because of the 3 snaps that happened from the Infinity Gauntlet. I just don't think that's a right way to go, personally. I mean, I get the whole idea of the radiation, because the Eternals kind of mentioned something like that, but I just personally do not want them to use that as an excuse as to why humans on Earth 616 now has mutations, and while we now have the X-Men. Those people who may have gotten mutations from the 3 snaps, I would prefer that they can still get the mutations, but they're not like the definitive mutants or the definitive X-Men that we meet that join the teams or who we follow. They could just exist. They shouldn't be the ones that are getting like the movies, because we're trying to see the X-Men. We're trying to see characters that we know that we can grow and love as these movies go on, and it shouldn't be people who just got their powers yesterday, especially since a lot of these characters had powers since they were kids, or you have people like Charles and Eric whose powers have been around since they were kids and traumatic times, particularly for Eric with him in the Holocaust. I just think that would be a disservice to those 2 characters in particular to do that to them. So with that said, let's get right into some backstory for Kurt. He was born in Bavaria to the blue-skinned, shape-shifting mutant leader known as Mystique, as we know and love her. She had an affair with Azazel while she was married to Baron Wagner under the disguise of Baroness Wagner. And so when she had the baby, her disguise was broken, I'm sure during childbirth, because she couldn't focus on being human anymore. And the baby also clearly was not human. So Mystique, along with baby Kurt, were chased out of the town, and she fled to a waterfall where she ended up throwing baby Kurt over the edge, and she fled. Azazel ended up finding him, and he took baby Kurt to the circus where Margali, a sorceress and gypsy queen, resided as a fortune teller. So she took Kurt into the circus, and she basically used her fortune telling as a cover for being a sorceress. But he was raised along with her 2 children, Stephen and Jermaine. She never legally adopted him, but she raised him as if he was her own son. So Kurt grew up really close with Steven. They were really, really good friends, basically like brothers. And Steven confided into Kurt that he was afraid that his magical heritage would corrupt him when he got older. And he said that if he ever did get corrupted and killed anybody, that he wanted Kurt to kill him. So of course, Kurt promised this, and things went on. So as Kurt got older, his natural gifts of agility really became into play, and not only because of his looks, he became like the star attraction. Audiences were like, oh my god, he's an amazing acrobat and trapeze artist, and they definitely thought that he was a human in this demon look. And he was given names such as Air Indigo, the Devil Man, and of course the amazing Nightcrawler. As time went on, technology began to change. Because of this, people's interest in the circus began to die out, and so interest in Kurt began to die out. So during the time that Kurt was in the circus, Herr Getman, who was the circus owner, was keeping him sedated and complacent throughout, like in between shows. So poor Kurt, he was on display and then being kept sedated, and the only time he was ever really okay was when he was hanging out with his family, which who knows how often he was able to hang out with them. But basically what ended up happening was that after a while, after Kurt was no longer bringing in crowds because technology was advancing, people were no longer interested in going to the circus because they could watch TV. Why would they go to the circus and see freaks when they could see that stuff on TV? So Kurt was no longer pulling in a crowd, so Eric Getman could no longer afford to keep Kurt sedated in between shows. So he was going to sell him. And Margali was worried about that, so she ended up working with somebody else in the circus to help free Kurt. And as Kurt fled, he ended up knocking over a torch, which set the circus on fire. So of course, Getman and his men chased Kurt through the forest, and they were going to shoot him in the face when he actually teleported. The first time he used his power, of course, was in fear, and he teleported away. He appeared near Father Wagner's church, which is funny, and because that's his name, and his father was a baron whose name was also Wagner. Is my computer thing coming apart? That is crazy. Ended up staying there for a couple days, but then like 2 days later, Armin, who assisted Margali in helping Kurt escape, he appeared because Getman and his men were chasing him for fleeing when he went to the church for sanctuary, but the men came in trying to take them back, and Father Wagner tried to stop them, but the men, of course, were too strong, and the church was set on fire during the brawls. Always a fire. Kurt was able to teleport Armin away. He went back to the church, and he was about actually to kill Getman because of of what he did to the church and he was doing to Father Wagner. And right before he was about to kill him, Father Wagner reminded him, "Wait, Kurt, you're humanity." And this caused Kurt to stop. But right before anything else could happen, the men were frozen. And so Professor Xavier appeared, and he was able to take control of this mob's minds, and he programmed them all to think that Kurt had died in the church fire. So later, Texas millionaire Amos Jardine, which I'm not sure if this happened before or after the Eric Getman thing. It kind of seems weird, but anyway, years later, Amos ran a large circus that was based in Florida, and it was like a freak show. So of course he knew of Kurt, and he wanted to buy him and put him in his freak show circus, which Kurt did not want to be in because, yo, I'm not a freak. And of course, it didn't matter what Kurt wanted because he ended up being in prison and drugged anyway. And he was getting ready to be taken to Florida, but he ended up being freed by a young boy, I guess, somehow, and the young boy threatened Jardine as well. I don't really know how that worked, but Kurt ended up escaping, and he ran away back to Germany, where he found Steven, who had been corrupted by magic, and he was killing people. So true to the word he agreed to when he was a child, he and Steven ended up having a brawl. And in that brawl, Kurt accidentally killed Steven by snapping his neck. And of course, because of all these killings, the town came to where Kurt and Steven were, and they found Kurt with Steven's body. So they assumed that Kurt, with his looks and with a dead body, was the one who was doing all the killings. So once again, an angry mob was chasing Kurt, and they managed to corner him, and they were going to kill him, probably by hanging, but they were all frozen. And Professor X appeared and was offering Kurt the option to become an X-Men, which he did. Kurt joined the group, they went to America, and him and Xavier went to the circus to try to explain to Margali what happened to Steven. However, she was not there, and she held Kurt responsible for Steven's death for years, to the point where I think she even tried to get revenge on him later. And I think during the time where she was trying to get revenge on him, that he did manage to tell her that what him and Steven had agreed on when they were children, as well as what Steven had done. So that ended up being fine. So Kurt basically now became a member of the X-Men. Awesome for Kurt, love him. Kurt's been through a lot, and it's just we never got to see really any background information from him. So before I segue into the movie versions, I want to talk about Kurt and X-Men Evolution. So in X-Men Evolution, of course, he was like a teenager. I believe he was between 16 and 18 years old. He was introduced in like the second or third episode of the first season, and this is probably the reason why I ended up loving him as much as I do, because of this version of him. Kurt was basically like, he was young, so he was so fun-loving, and he would sometimes get into trouble because of his fun-loving, and sometimes he would play around with stuff he shouldn't be playing around with, and it's like, bro, what are you doing? But he always seemed to have a good time, but he could be serious when he needed to be serious. He always kind of knew how to use his powers. His powers are very, very handy, and he knew very much how to use them. He also had like an inward self-conscious and hate for his outward appearance. He uses an image inducer that allows him to look human. Because in X-Men Evolution, they're in high school, he goes to school. Like, he actually goes to high school, even though they have school at the X-Men mansion. He wears the image inducer to appear human while they're actually in high school. I actually don't kind of mind the fact that they actually went to high school, like an actual public high school, because this allows them to kind of be around humanity, which kind of help feeds into what Charles wanted, which is humans and mutants living together and learning together. So it kind of works in that regard. But I just now thought about the fact that they went to a public high school as well as going to school at the X Mansion. Oh, the amount of homework. I would hate it. Human, he had like bluish black hair. I loved him. He was voiced by Brad Swell, who I think has a great voice. Probably know his voice particularly from being like Yagami in Death Note, as well as being Lan Hikari and Mega Man NT Warrior. I loved both of those shows. I definitely always recognize him when I hear him because of him playing Kurt in X-Men Evolution. So, for movie Kurt, we have had two versions of Kurt. And first we had him in X2 X-Men United, where he was played by the wonderful Alan Cumming. And he has literally one of the most iconic scenes, if not the most iconic scene in the X-Men movies, in that White House scene where he is bamfing everywhere and is kicking butt.
Perimeter breach at visitors checkpoint.
is so amazing, and I'm so sad that I did not see that in the theaters, so I'm pretty sure that was awesome to have seen. Kurt is very religious anyway. In that movie, they really kind of amp up the fact that he's a religious man, and so when Storm and Jean go to find him, he is in a Catholic church, and they find him and he's wearing a crucifix, and he also has that look where he has blue skin, but he has like tattoos that he has gotten or given himself, and he says that each one of them is for every sin that he's committed, which is a lot of sin because it's all over his face and all over his chest, and that's a lot, right? And I think that was definitely a very unique idea for him because of him being such a devout man. That kind of makes sense, especially considering the fact that his history of being abused the way he was, that he probably views a lot of things that happened to him that was traumatic as sin. So I thought that was a really good way to go with his look. However, I was always sad that we never got to see any backstory, and I think that with the way his character was in that movie, how kind he was and how generous and selfless, it would have been nice to kind of seen some, like, I don't know, some flashbacks or something. But of course, we always had to spend our flashbacks on Wolverine, so I'm just saying. But they end up finding him and they take him with him, and him and Mystique even have like an interaction where he's like, they're talking about how she looks, and he's like, well, if you can look like anybody, why would you not kind of look like everybody else to blend in? And she's like, because we shouldn't have to. And it's a great moment, but it's like, of course, they never acknowledge the fact that she's his mother. And I think that that's always a crazy thing, is that we've had 2 movies where Kurt and Mystique have been in the movies together. Well, actually 3, because if you count Dark Phoenix, and they have literally never talked about it at all. And it's like, we all know. Why won't y'all talk about it? I don't understand. But I already loved Kurt because of X-Men Evolution, and so when X2 came out, I loved him even more because I really liked his look. I liked his little pirate coat, and I love the fact that he tried to be as helpful as possible, even though he didn't really know any of them. He had really like no horse in that race at all, but he was trying to be as helpful as he could. And I love the fact that him and Storm kind of had like a really good like rapport going on. Like, I actually did like their chemistry, and I thought that that was a really interesting friendship to go into, especially considering the fact that they did pretty much join the X-Men at the same time, so that kind of made sense. But we didn't really get to see more of that. They were together the most, but then he was gone in X-Men 3. And I'm pretty sure a lot of it had to do with the fact that Alan Cumming did not want to spend 6 to 8 hours in a chair putting that makeup on, concerning the fact that it was, I remember watching behind the scenes of the makeup for that movie, and of course it was color in his hair, it was green undertone, a blue undertone, more blue, more blue, more blue, of course the contacts, the teeth, and then the same thing with his body, green, green, blue, 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 and then of course then came the tattoos, then came the ears, then came the hands, then came the feet, then came the tail. Like, that's a lot of stuff, and I'm pretty sure he was like, alright y'all, I don't know if I can do this again. So it just kind of sucks that we didn't hear anything about him though. They didn't mention him at all, and so I was very upset to not see him in X-Men The Last Stand. I do wonder though if he would have tried to have gotten the little cure. Not that it would last long, because obviously Eric was given the cure, and he ended up moving a chest piece in like the end credit scene. So I would have liked to have known if Kurt would have gone to get the cure, because he wanted to look maybe normal. I can't say in other versions that I've seen of him in animated versions. There's one in particular that I saw on TV one time, and I was like, oh, I love this version. I love this look of him. I can't say that he would, because even though X-Men Evolutions, Kurt was very self-conscious about his look, I don't know if Kurt was ever self-conscious about his look otherwise. So I don't really know, but that would have been just interesting to see. So the second version of Kurt that we've seen was played by Cody Smith-McPhee, and who was introduced in X-Men Apocalypse, and then again he was in Dark Phoenix. And I really liked him in Apocalypse. We first saw him when he was thrown into the cage match versus Angel, which is the whole Angel Demon thing, and I still want to know how they got that boy in that trunk. So I can't help but wonder if he got in that trunk, if he was like taken from the circus. Maybe this is the whole time where Amos was trying to buy him, and he ended up getting bought by Amos. Either the shipment was hijacked by the people who want to make money off of him by making him cage fight, or if they changed Amos from a circus owner to a cage fight owner, and the guy with the, well, no, because that guy was German, unless he was just speaking German. I was gonna say that the guy with the mustache in X-Men Apocalypse who was doing the commentary maybe could have been Amos, but unless he was just speaking German, he was German, and Amos was from Florida. But you know, whatever. That guy didn't have a name. And as far as I know, electricity does not prevent Kurt from using his powers. So I thought it was a cool way to kind of nerve him a little bit, because I guess I can see why an electrical current would then scramble his ability to teleport. I can see kind of how that would work, but because it's not a thing. So yeah, he ends up in the cage fight with Angel. He doesn't want to fight him, but Angel's like, you come on, fight or they'll kill us both. So Kurt ends up fighting him after trying to get out and get zapped. So of course he now has to fight. Ends up hurting Angel, but then Mystique also goes, because I guess she's going to find him. I'm assuming she's going to go find him, and she rescues him because she's like, come with me if you want to live. And so they end up disappearing, and she gives him like a passport to America. But again, no other interaction between them outside of her getting him to the manor. And then he ends up meeting Scott, Jean, and Jubilee, who was grossly underused, and they end up going to the mall. He gets a little 80s makeover. It was super cute with his little Thriller jacket on, and he ends up becoming part of the group. And because they're at the mall, they ended up missing the whole mansion blowing up thing. So they ended up up going in the plane when Stryker took Mystique and Quicksilver, which he didn't really need to, and Moira. They get into the base and they find Wolverine and all this drama and stuff like that. And then Kurt ends up kind of being more utilized towards the end when they're trying to save Professor X from Apocalypse. And him and Angel square off again. And like I said in my video about Angel, I really would have liked to have seen them kind of have more of a brutal interaction. I guess I just wanted to see blood. But I kind of feel like the Angel would have been mad that Kurt ruined his wings, because he did ruin his wings. And the fact that here comes Kurt one time in this fight and he manages to escape, whereas Angel's been in there however long he's been in there and he's just been fighting to survive. So I would feel like that he would be mad about that. So they kind of had them fighting, but we didn't really get to see a lot of it because obviously with Kurt's powers it's really difficult. But I just wish we kind of would have got more of an interaction between them. I don't know. He ends up like saving everybody, because when the plane was about to crash, he ends up teleporting everybody in the carrier, and because of that he ends up being basically unconscious the rest of the climax of the movie. And we don't really see him again. He doesn't really have any more lines after he like wakes up, so there's that. And then in Dark Phoenix, he's in it as well. He helps with the mission in the beginning with trying to teleport the astronauts out of their spacecraft, and then of course some other things. And then at the end, in some of the climax scenes, he gets to have some really kind of like badass fighting moments. But it's kind of crazy to see him like lose his mind the way he did and like kill people. Like when he dropped that girl in front of the train and she died, and he looked at her like, I was like, well damn. Like I didn't particularly like that, because that's not really how Kurt is. Like he can get pretty like brutal, but not like that. Like as far as I know, he doesn't really kill, so that was very interesting to see that. I didn't particularly care for it, but I thought Cody Smith-McPhee was still great. Like I think he was a great choice for that part. So you know, whatever. But he was once again pretty much underutilized in Dark Phoenix as well. So there's that. Kurt is a very like layered. I feel like that the actors I chose will be able to play this. He of course will always be a showman. He is a grand character. If you remember Rumpelstiltskin from Once Upon a Time, him and Kurt are kind of like in the same wheelhouse in terms of their outward personality. I mean, Kurt is not nearly as cruel as Rumpelstiltskin is, but in terms of like grand gestures and I'm a showman, that's what Kurt is like. I mean, he takes everything seriously, but just know that Kurt is going to be having fun as well. Another big thing, which I mentioned before from when I'm talking about X2, is that Kurt is a very devout Christian, and he usually sometimes wears a lot, like he wears like a cross necklace and things like that. And I think that really allows him to kind of remain grounded in everything that's happened to him over his life. And I think that if they do and bring him back, they should keep that, because I think that's important to his character. I mean, you can obviously kind of make it where it's not like annoying, but it's just part of who he is, and you don't have to like make a big deal out of it, but we can just know that this is something that's important to Kurt. With that said, Kurt is also like a huge flirt. If you are a beautiful woman, he gonna flirt with you. That's what Kurt is like. Okay, he is very influenced by swashbuckling pirates. He loves Errol Flynn. A lot of that is shown in his like outfits and stuff, the way he kind of acts. And I think that there's even some iterations where he has a sword. I just love him. He loves high adventure and romance, and whenever he sees a pretty face, oh my god, he's the dashing rogue. Like, he's a suave pirate. And I believe that Wolverine in some instances teases him and calls him a pirate, as well as calling him elf. I love it. He's also very, very loyal, and he's also a big optimist. So I think that's something big to keep. We have enough brooding characters in the MCU as well as in the X-Men. We have Wolverine, we have Scott to some extent, we have Eric, we have enough people who brood. So we need to have somebody like Kurt, who is like an optimist, still likable, who's a lovable person. I think that's very important to have. So with Kurt's powers, we all really know and can recognize with him and associate with him is teleportation. And that when we see him, you think, oh, he teleports. So he can teleport himself in the clothes he's wearing, as well as other things around him, depending on the mask. He travels through like the brimstone dimension, but he goes through it so fast that he doesn't even know that he goes through it. So, and when he disappears, he leaves behind a puff of smoke. So depending on the distance, it can be a lot tiring for him. He's also very agile, as we know from him being a trapeze artist and acrobat. So he has something called beginning teleportation, which he was able to gain after making a deal with Azazel's like little gremlins or whatever, which I think from what I read, it said that basically it's like he can lock onto certain things, transspatial displacement, which allows him to pop wherever he needs to go, depending on wherever that thing is, as long as he knows about it. But he doesn't have to like have been there before or see it, because normally he's like, I have to see where I'm going to know where I'm teleporting to, which is why he doesn't like to teleport like into rooms he's never been to before, because he can end up inside a wall. He is flexible bone structure. He can camouflage. He can blend into the shadows a little bit. He has a prehensile tail, which allows him to grab onto objects with his tail. He has night vision, which makes sense. Superhuman agility, superhuman reflexes. He's also really fast. At some point he became immortal, but but I'm not sure how long that lasts. Very skilled in hand-to-hand combat and is a master at fencing, which he can even do with his tail. And he is strong enough to support his entire body weight. And he's multilingual, which makes sense. So Kurt is amazing, you guys. So for the fan casting of Kurt, with all those things in mind, I was definitely trying to choose people who I feel like could look really good in the blue look, as well as portraying that optimistic personality, being a ladies man, having a very sad background but doesn't allow it to like affect him, but also be very kind of like mysterious in his own way, but he always plays it up where he doesn't seem that way, and I think that's very important to have. So I feel like the actors that I chose really would do that really, really well, and some of them kind of lean more into like the brooding side of it, but I feel like they could handle the optimism that Kurt needs and the roguish, high adventure, high energy personality that he has. I think these actors I chose would be great. And I also want to say that if they do bring him back, I don't know if I want to necessarily have him be CGI, because Kurt's skin is actually blue fur. It's not blue skin, it's fur. So I don't know if that would necessarily work. I do not think they need to do the tattoos thing again, so I'm not sure what they would do. I feel like that unique design should stay with the Fox's X-Men, because at this point, if they bring that back, that's too familiar with those versions of X-Men. I don't think we need to bring those back, personally. I feel the same way about Mystique, which I'll talk about in another video. To remind you, since it's been a long time, you don't know like when they're introduced these characters. They can introduce them as teenagers, you know, in their 20s, or they could be adults. We don't know, because when Kurt joined the X-Men, he was an adult, but we don't know if he was like a young adult. So we don't really know how old he was, and they could do whatever they want. So I'm just giving 3 options and who I think would play characters in that right moment. So for teenage Kurt, I have one choice, and it took me actually a minute to think about it, because originally, when I did this fan casting on my blog, I just had the 2 options, the young and the older. And I was like, oh, if I think about teenage version, I need somebody who can fill the same space that the other 3 actors I chose could do. So I was thinking really long and hard about someone who was young and kind of had this somber air to them, but also seems very sweet, and he's very likable, and he probably looked really good with that blue look. He kind of has this otherworldly look to him, and I chose Noah Schnapp, who I know from Stranger Things. He plays Will Byers in the show, and of course, you know, Will Byers has kind of been like a tragic character. He's the quiet one of their group, and some like the first season he of course disappeared, and he was dealing with the Upside Down on his own, and then second season he had that whole thing happening with whatever that creature was that was messing with him. And I feel like that Noah Schnapp would really be able to play the sad parts of Kurt, because I would think that if we did see him, that we would see him mostly when he's in the circus, and I would love to see that played out, which feeds into thing I would like, where they do like a mini series or like an anthology series on Disney Plus that introduces each of these characters so we can get more backstory, so that way when you do a movie, you don't have to try to cram all of this information about these characters into a movie. So I want to see an episode about Kurt talking about the Munich circus. I'm just saying. Not only do I think that Noah Schnapp can get the personality down, I think he will look good in the blue look, and I think he'd have fun, and I think that he would be that type of character where people would be like, oh my god, he's such a cinnamon roll, I want to protect him. I think that's what he would do for Kurt. I think that he would do really good at that, and he's so likable. I just feel like that he would do a really, really good job as teenage Kurt. So Noah Schnapp. So moving on to my young adult Kurt, who is like young adult 20s. I have 2 options, and I think both of them would do fantastic. I think they both would do really good in the look, because one of them already did, and I think that they both would handle the somber parts of him, the quiet parts, as well as being the outwardly optimistic and roguish and high adventure, romantic, flirty type. I think they both could do that, as well as kind of being a little awkward, maybe a little naive, but I think they both can handle that very well. So I chose Cody Smith-McPhee, who I liked so much as Kurt, the X-Men Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. I liked him so much that I would love to see him come back as Kurt. Like, to me, he was the standout in those. Like, I loved him, and I was just like, oh, he was so good. So I would love for him to come back. Like, he's one of the only actors from the previous movies who I actually would want to come back to play the character again. Cody Smith-McPhee. And my other option is Timothée Chalamet. Now, I picked Timothée Chalamet at the time when I originally picked him. I only really knew him from like Lady Bird and Call Me By Your Name, but he hasn't been in like all this stuff just yet, so the decision made more sense then. But I think he could still play the part too. He would play it very differently from Cody. Timothy has this ability to kind of be very likable, but like very kind of quiet, introspective as well, which I think works well for Kurt. I haven't really seen him be like super outgoing, optimistic. There's some moments in Little Women where he plays Laurie that he kind of does that, but it's not like a ton. A lot of the characters that Timothée Chalamet has played haven't really been that type of personality, so I would love to see him play something like that would be a completely different personality than what we've seen him play, which is why I also casted him as Jim Hawkins in my Treasure Planet fan cast, which you of course can check out as well. I feel like that this role would be against type for him, and I think that he would also look good in the look. So for my young adult Kurt, I have Cody Smith-McPhee and Timothée Chalamet. So for my older adult, I have two choices. One I have originally was Matthew Good, and I was really choosing him off of look because he looks weird. Like, he's weird and handsome, and I've seen him in like maybe one or two things, and off of what I saw, I feel like that he could do a good job, but I was really going off of looks because I couldn't really think of somebody who I really liked as Kurt, who I really wanted to settle on. So I kind of was going off of looks for him. But then fairly recently, when I was redoing my list so I could do these videos, I ended up landing on one of my honorable mentions, and I was thinking about him a lot seriously. Now, he's not as tall as these other guys, which I think is okay, but I chose Rami Malek, and I think he's such a good actor. Like, he is so good. I have loved him for so long. I have loved him since Night at the Museum. I have been a fan for years, and I feel like that he has a good amount of versatility, that he would do fantastic as Kurt. Now, I don't know if he could do a German accent. Actually, I don't know if any of these actors could do a German accent besides Cody, because he did it, but I feel like that he would do a good job, and I feel like that he would do that optimism, and he would have fun, and he could be a flirt. I've seen him play all of these roles. Everything that Kurt is, I have seen Rami Malek play at least one time, and I think that he would do a great job. Those are my choices for Kurt. I have Noah Schnapp as teenage version, I have Timothée Chalamet and Cody Smith-McPhee as young adult Kurt, and then I have Matthew Good, but more so Rami Malek as adult Kurt. Oh my gosh! Okay, so now we're going to be moving on to Kitty Pryde, aka Shadowcat. Now, I actually remember reading like a comic that talked about her recruitment. I don't know which one I was reading, but I read something about when she was recruited. So anyway, Catherine Pryde was the daughter of Carmen and Teresa Pryde, and she was born in Deerfield, Illinois. So she was leading a normal life as a 13-year-old girl. She began to suffer increasingly intense headaches, and it turns out the headaches were basically a result of Kitty's mutant ability, which allows her to pass through solid matter. She was unaware of this ability until one afternoon that Emma Frost, the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, arrived to speak to her with the hope of enrolling Kitty in her Massachusetts academy. During her visit, Kitty suffered her worst headache yet, and she went upstairs, and when the headache stopped, she was surprised that she was on the floor of her living room, because she laid on her bed, but then somehow phased right through. So after Emma Frost left, Charles Xavier, he appeared along with others, which included Storm, because I definitely remember Storm talking to Kitty. So he appeared with Storm and some others to hopefully recruit Kitty for his school. And so in the midst of this, Storm and Kitty kind of like had like a moment. They went to like a malt shop and got to know each other a little bit more. And definitely seemed like that Kitty would join because of her talking to Storm, who, as I said in my previous video, she's very warm and compassionate to people. I mean, unless you mess with her, which clearly she hadn't done that. But Kitty and Storm's conversations were short-lived, because all of a sudden, boom, 3 Hell Knights burst into the shop being led by Emma Frost, and eventually they were overcome and taken as prisoners. But Kitty, of course, didn't want to leave them behind because she had created a quick friendship with Storm. So she hid aboard their hovercraft, the Hellfire's Club hovercraft, and she found the captive X-Men in the Frost International Complex. And she found Storm, who gave Kitty the phone number to the X-Men and told her to call Phoenix, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler, which I saw that the Phoenix was there, and I'm wondering if this is around the time that Jean was healing and the Phoenix took on her form and was part of the team. So I wonder if this saying, like, when I'm reading the information, if they're calling her Phoenix because to distinguish that she's not Jean Grey, or if that they are aware that she is the Phoenix. So I don't really know. So some of this information I do remember looking up a long time ago and reading in some of the comics, but I mean, I don't know everything, so I'm going to also fill in the gaps that I don't know with info. So, but basically the team arrived, and Phoenix comforted Kitty in her frenzy, but they managed to save the imprisoned X-Men. And afterward, Kitty's father, of course, was upset that she was put in danger, understandably so. But the Phoenix ended up using her powers invasively to calm Kitty's father, Carmen, down. You know, and it's like, he has a right to be upset. It's not like it was their intention to put her in danger, but I'd be upset too. Kitty's parents allowed her to join the X-Men and quickly became a valuable member of the team. She was the newest member and probably one of the youngest, and during her first training in the Danger Room, Charles had took weeks to set up a particular program, but Kitty walked straight through it because of her phasing powers. So because of that, she became christened by Storm as Bright, which she didn't keep that name for a long time. At some point, I saw that she also got the name called Ariel. I don't know why. And then of course at some point she formed a romance with her teammate Colossus, which that relationship has been a long-standing relationship for Kitty is her relationship with Colossus. So I would like to see that in future movies as well. I mean, if she starts off as a 13-year-old, we probably won't see it for a long time unless we get a visit from Kate, her adult version. But the time we ever saw a glimpse of it was after in Days of Future Past, when it was like after Wolverine changed the future and we saw Kitty teaching a class and Colossus was in the room with her. That's the only time we ever really saw them interact at all. So of course her and Storm were really good friends and she became really close with Colossus, but she was uncomfortable around Kurt, which I was like, woo! Which I mean, it makes sense off of going off his look, but you know, whatever. So for Kitty, her abilities are, she of course has intangibility, which allows her to pass through any matter, known as phasing, by passing her atoms through the spaces between the atoms of the object in which she's moving through. And she has gravity phasing as well, which means she's allowed to phase against gravity. She also has chronoskimming, which is the ability to project an individual's consciousness in time, which is interesting because I remember when Days of Future Past happened, I was really confused because I had read parts of that comic before and I was like, why is she sending Wolverine's mind back in time when in the comic she's the one who goes back in time? So I didn't realize that she had this ability, so I stand corrected on being angry about that. But in the comics, Kitty's still the one who goes back in time, not Wolverine, but you know, whatever. But it says that as when she's doing that, any changes to the timeline will not take effect until the connection is severed. And it's only after the target's consciousness will return to the same point at the time that the travel first took place. Okay, I didn't know that. She is an expert combatant, she's very skilled, and she's able to take down several members of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Okay, you go girl. So for her personality, from what I was able to gather, because Kitty's been played in different ways that I've seen her, so her personality compared to everybody else is a little bit harder to pin down. From what I've seen overall, she is considered a dork. She loves science fiction. She's a computer hacker. She loves Dungeons and Dragons. Because of these skill sets, she has a lot of good social skills, which is really cool. But with all that said, she's very down to earth and very approachable. In her younger days, she struggled with self-esteem issues regarding her body and appearance. But as she's gotten older, she definitely got confident in her abilities and her appearance. Now that she's confident, she's never been the type to be full of herself. She jokingly refers to herself as the goddess of the computers once or twice, but she is known to humble herself. It seems like Kitty is very self-aware, so she may make a joke, but she's like very self-aware and she's not doing it to be arrogant. A little bit of a temper, but she did grow out of it during her teenage years, but you know, don't mess with her and she'll still do what she gotta do. I think that this actually kind of aligns with the comic that I didn't finish reading, but I was reading it. It was like a Kitty Pryde and Star-Lord Peter Quill comic where they were like, it was like a romance. She had like amnesia and she forgot that they were together. It was really interesting and I kind of liked it. And she definitely had breathtaking anger issues. Like she was ready to kick his butt at any turn. So that's kind of on par with that. So I think that's cool. So for X-Men Evolution, which of course is what I was introduced to her for, Kitty was very much a girly girl. She kind of had like this Valley Girl talk where she would talk like, oh my god, you guys, I was just totally at the mall. Like she would talk like that. And she was such a foil to Rogue's character, who was like the goth emo girl. And so they were very, very different, but they had like an interesting friendship. But Kitty and Kurt, even though at the beginning she was very uncomfortable around him, they ended up being really close. Kitty's also Jewish. I'll say that. But Kitty, she was always very sweet. She was upbeat and cheerful, very optimistic. This is why her and Kurt ended up getting along. And she was very naive at times too. And she lived this shelter life before joining the X-Men. So I think that's probably, I think them going to public school, like I said earlier, but with Kurt kind of helps them with that. She's very caring and sympathetic, and she used to be a little bit of a ditz. So I think in this show, I don't recall her being much of a computer savvy person, but I would prefer for her to be a computer savvy. That'd be kind of cool. I don't think we had anybody on the X-Men who I could think of who was very computer savvy. She could still be kind of ditzy in a naive way, but not when it comes to like computer stuff. Or maybe it could be something that she kind of puts on to be underestimated because she's small, but you know. So yeah, I mean, I loved Kitty in the animated show. She was cool. So in the X-Men movies, we've had Kitty played by one person the entire, well, I won't say, we've had Kitty played by a couple different people, but most well known, she was played by Elliot Page. So in X-Men The Last Stand is when we are introduced to her like officially, and Kitty basically is like, you know, she's a student, and then like when Professor X, we don't really see like a ton of her like in the beginning, like not really. And so after Professor X dies, we see her interact with Bobby a lot, and he's like being like very sympathetic to her, which is fine. You can be kind to your friend, but he was like being extra sympathetic to her. Like she was sad about him dying, and they went to go ice skate on the fountain. He made the water an ice skating rink. Boy, what? So it's so crazy. So I definitely remember her mostly like from that. And then of course at the end when they were going to go find the kid who could cure the X-Men, I remember her particularly like running through the rooms and the Juggernaut chasing her, of course. And then you have the iconic line, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!" Like, you know, iconic, and that whole scene where she's just really trying to get the kid. So we don't really see her do a ton in that movie because of the fact that it's not really about her. I mean, her powers are utilized in the team kind of well because they did send her in to do what she had to do, but we don't really get to see a ton of her, to be fairly honest. And then later we see her again in Days of Future Past, where she is sending Logan's consciousness to his body back in the 70s, which I guess is why they had him do it, besides the fact that he's Wolverine, is because she wouldn't have been alive during that time anyway, so I guess they couldn't protect her own mind back, whatever. So a lot of the movie is her like running around, and then like her and Logan trying to find a safe place to protect his body, and then it's mostly when it cut back to the future, it's her trying to keep hold of the connection so that way nothing is severed until he changes what he needs to change. So she ends up getting like hurt because Wolverine ends up like losing his mind, ends up like stabbing her, and she's like really hurt, which in the Rogue cut, Rogue appears and takes over for Kitty by touching her, and she continues connection, but it's not the version that we saw in the theaters. So, but at the end, Mystique managed to like make it the right choice to the point where they don't die. So we don't really see her again until the end, where we're walking through the school and she's teaching class with Colossus. So we don't really see Kitty again after that, and that's really kind of it. Like, there's the only times we ever really see her. We see her in 2 movies, and she's kind of like underutilized. I mean, she has like big roles, but we don't get to see her that much. So there's that. And I think Elliot Page was fine as Kitty. I mean, I was so used to Kitty in X-Men Evolution that Elliot's version was more kind of tomboyish than I was used to seeing, so it was very different for me at the time. But I think it's fine. Thinking about her personality, could have made a different choices for Elliot's Kitty, kind of make her a little bit more upbeat and more of a social girl, because she wasn't really like that. If they kind of would have made a couple changes where she was like that, it would have been a little different, because they were trying to, it felt like they were trying to make it seem like she was so different from Rogue, but she wasn't really that different from Rogue. So, because it's not like as if Rogue had that much of a personality either. So I would hope in these future movies, if we do get Kitty, no matter what age she's in, that she has a personality. Because from what I've read and from what I've seen, she has one. She has a great personality. So let's let her have one. For the choices that I chose for Kitty, I originally had my young adult and my adult versions, but my younger versions were definitely teenagers as opposed to how most of them were like maybe young adult. So for Kitty, I ended up having to knock my younger version down to teenage and actually find a young adult version. But I'm very happy with the choices that I chose, and I think I actually have great options for Kitty. For teenage Kitty, I originally had Sophia Lillis here as well, but then when I was doing this, I was like, you know what, I think she'd be better as a young Jean Grey, so I ended up bumping her over there. And so for teenage Kitty, I chose Millie Bobby Brown, who of course we know from Stranger Things as well as the Godzilla movies. From what I've seen her in her acting, I think she's a very good actress. I think she manages to do very sad and tortured very well, but also the upbeat type of personality, because I didn't watch Enola Holmes, but from the trailers that I saw of it, that character was very like bubbly and kind of, very much similar to how I see Kitty being, and I think that she would do a really good job. I feel like that if Kitty is introduced as a teenager, especially since she gets her powers around 13 years old, that I think Millie Bobby Brown would handle that really well. And I feel like depending on whichever way they decide to go with her personality, if they combine her upbeat personality from X-Men Evolution as well as her social butterfly and tech savvy and fantasy loving personality that I've read from the comic, I think that would be a really good mesh, and that Millie Bobby Brown would play that very, very well. For my young adult Kitty, I was actually surprised how quick this one came to me, and I chose Olivia Cooke. Now, I know her from Ready Player One, Meet Earl and the Dying Girl, and Thoroughbred, and I think she is a great actress. Every time I see her, I'm like, girl, like, there's something about her that's so, like, she's so good, does a lot of good acting with her eyes, and I feel like that the choices that I chose for Kitty, like, they could all be the same person, just growing up, so that kind of works out too. But I feel like that Olivia Cooke would also be able to play very similarly to how Millie Bobby Brown could play, but she'll be a little bit more serious, but still be upbeat, still love high fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons, and very big on computers, and a social butterfly, but be very serious in how she handles her missions. And I think that she would do great. And I feel like that she would have a really good chemistry with both Cody and Timothy, because I really want Kitty and Kurt to be friends, and I feel like they would have good chemistry as friends. So yes, Olivia Cooke as my young adult Kitty Pryde. So for my older version, I actually was looking kind of hard for her, and when I originally did this casting on my blog, I remember googling brunette actresses, and so I was just trying to see if somebody would like stick out to me, and I was looking through some of the pictures, and then I came up Emmy Rossum, and I was like, Oh my god, she would be great. So I know Emmy Rossum particularly from Phantom of the Opera as well as Beautiful Creatures, and then she's in Shameless, which I don't really watch, but I've seen episodes because one of my best friends watches the show, and so I've seen the episodes, and I think that she would be great as Kitty. So for example, if they redid Days of Future Past the way it should be done, where adult Kate is transferred back into her teenage version of Kitty or her young adult version, that Emmy Rossum would be the Kate that we see, or Kitty we see, and then Olivia or Millie Bobby Brown, probably more so Olivia, would have to act the way that Emmy Rossum would act as adult Kate. I feel like Emmy Rossum would be really good at that. I think she can do all the things that the other girls could do, as well as being serious and being a little bit hardcore, as well as being badass, because I've seen her do it in Shameless. And I've seen her kind of have like this kind of sassy personality that she has in Beautiful Creatures, and this kind of sweet personality that she has in Phantom of the Opera. And I feel like that she can embody all of those things that Kitty has and be great at it. And she's so pretty. I love Emmy Rossum. She's great. So my choices for Kitty, for teenage Kitty, I have Millie Bobby Brown. For young adult Kitty, I have Olivia Cooke. And then for adult Kitty, I have Emmy Rossum. So my honorable mentions for Kurt, I have Aidan Gallagher as teenage Kurt, who I know from the Umbrella Academy. I feel like he would do a fantastic job, because that kid on that show, character actor, okay? He would be a fantastic Kurt. I have Karan Brar. I think that he would be a good teenage and a good young adult version of Kurt. And then for my older versions of Kurt, I have Robert Sheehan, who is amazing. I mean, Umbrella Academy, Mortal Instruments, Mortal Engines, The Road Within, Bad Samaritan, Misfits, so many great things. I think that he would be great as Nightcrawler as well. And then lastly, I have Gaspard Iliel, who I haven't really seen him in anything, but I feel like just looks wise he would do a good job. And he's French, so I'm assuming he can do a German accent. I mean, I'm just assuming it, but you know, I feel like that looks wise he would be a good Kurt too. So for teenage Kitty, I have Joey King, and she's most known right now from The Kissing Booth. I've only watched the first one at this time, and I think she'd be fine as Kitty if she was chosen. And then I have Mackenzie Foy, who of course was Renesmee from Twilight, as well as Clara from the Nutcracker movie. I think she has a good look to her, and as well as Caitlin Deaver, who I know from Booksmart, and I think both her and Mackenzie would also bridge the gap from teenage Kitty to young adult Kitty. And alongside them, I have Haley Lou Richardson, who I know from Split as well as 5 Feet Apart. I think would do a good job as Kitty as well. And then Natalia Dyer, who is Nancy in Stranger Things. I think she'd be good. And then Maya Mitchell, who I know from the Teen Beach movies as well as The Fosters, which I didn't really watch, but I know she's in it, as young adult Kitty as well. And then lastly, I have Shelley Hennig, who I know from Teen Wolf as well as The Secret Circle, and I think that she would do a good job as well. So this is my fan casting for Kurt and Kitty. Like I keep saying, I really want them to be friends. I know in the beginning Kitty was very uncomfortable around him because of his look, but I think once she gets to know him and see how similar they are in terms of their optimism and their outgoing personalities, I feel like that they would really get along. I always kind of like being like, oh, Kitty Kurt romance, but I know her and Colossus have a thing, so I would be fine with a Kitty and Kurt like best friendship. I really would hope for that, and that he's somebody that she would turn to, and I feel like that all these choices I chose would have good chemistry with each other. So just as a recap, I have Noah Schnapp and Millie Bobby Brown. No, they work together, so they have great chemistry as teenage Kurt and teenage Kitty. I have Cody Smith-McPhee or Timothy Chalamet and Olivia Cooke as young adults Kurt and Kitty. I have Matthew Good and mostly Rami Malek and Emmy Rossum as adult Kurt and Kitty. So these two characters are so much fun, and I would love to see them brought back and see them done in a good, fun, and different way than we've seen them previously. And I think the actors that I chose would all do a really, really great job, no matter which age group they decide to do. I feel like that I chose people who would play the characters really well, do them justice, and I feel like that depending on what the MCU decides to do, there will be longevity there as well. So let me know your thoughts on the casting that I have chosen for these two characters today. Put them in the comment section below, as well as putting who you'd like to see play with Nightcrawler and Kitty in the MCU, and any other X-Men characters you'd like to see be brought into the movies, and who you'd like to see play them. So of course, you guys, thanks so much for watching. Please be sure to like the video, to subscribe, be sure to hit that bell to get notifications for when I post more videos, and as always, you guys, I will see you in the next video, hopefully soon. Bye.